Good morning, everyone. I'm really excited you're with us today because I'm here with Luke Sherwin, the co-founder and creative director at Casper. Thanks so much for being with us, Luke.
Thanks for having me.
So like I told you, I just realized why Casper is such a perfect name. You order a mattress online. It comes shipped to your house for free in the size of a box that's like a mini fridge. And you get a 100-night free trial. Before we dive into that magic, Lutz, let's go back to the early days when you guys were working at a co-working space and noticed that people were falling asleep on beanbags. What's it like disrupting an age-old industry?
A lot more fun than I expected, I'll say that. When we started, there were 5 of us. That was about 8 months ago. And we're now 8 months in and about over 30. And I think what we found is that we're striking a chord with an existing dissatisfaction, particularly between people who share our sort of our generation, the ages of 25 to the late 30s, with the existing mattress industry and sleep industry. And in watching ourselves grow, we've been lucky to have stories written by customers or people who have experienced our brand in some capacity that have touched on things that we never expected. What is it like to have sex on the bed? What can you do with a Casper box when you receive it that's, creating a playground for your kids? And I think, when we first started, we were very much under the impression that, we're making a mattress, we're starting with a mattress and we'll go from there, and hopefully this mattress sells well enough that we can start thinking about other aspects of sleep. And what we've realized is that actually there's a much greater interest and investment in sleep that's being made by our customers, and for that reason, we're researching what we can do in other categories. So it's an interesting time at Casper.
So you guys then went after you had this idea to go and get funding, and David Tisch, who's the managing partner at Box Group in New York, has shared with me that the most important part of those beginning meetings are answering the why. So let's say, Luke, I'm sitting here, I have $10 million that I want to put into a new startup. Why should I put it behind your team?
So behind our team and not just the idea, just focus on the team. Well, I think one of the interesting things is we're a 5-founder team, and actually for investors that often is seen as a complication as opposed to an advantage. We have 5 founders, and we have all very specific roles. We have Philip, the CEO. He's very much the boss. Jeff, who's engineered and designed mattresses for years as a consultant at IDEO. Gabe, who's built technology as a CTO. Neil, who's basically the operational foundation for everything that goes on in Casper, and myself, which is kind of creative direction, brand direction. So we all very fall into siloed verticals, and what's nice is that when you're starting a company, those verticals are some of the basics that you need to build a minimum viable product. And for that reason, you have the kind of energy that a founder can bring, 100-hour weeks working full throttle from the very beginning. So it was nice when we launched with our product. It was just the founding team, and very quickly we brought on fantastic director talent. So bringing it back to an investor lens, I think the idea that we covered from an experience standpoint, we had the right amount of experience, youth, and vertical specificity to build a mattress company with just that founding team. And I think that's not something that is encountered too frequently. From an idea perspective, we were certainly looked at through the lens of other companies that have disrupted old, antiquated or opaque industries, and mattresses are among the worst. And from a consumer satisfaction standpoint, it's often the shopping experience often ranks lower than that of buying a used car. So the idea of bringing a beautiful experience that is seamless, a trust, a level of transparency to an industry that's over $13 billion, no doubt is something that venture capitalists like to see. So
I think one of the things that's so alluring about you guys too is that you've really eliminated choice. So you turn the idea that more users, more choices on its head, like you've done with everything else that you're doing. Why is simplicity so important to Casper?
So I'll look at it from two ways. One, how we sit in the existing world of mattresses, and two, how simplicity is a greater thing applies to Casper. So on the first one, the current mattress experience has you going to a store, trying 15 beds, each one for possibly a minute, and deciding ultimately how you're going to spend from between $500 and $4,000 on something that's going to last you for the rest 10 years of your life, on what ultimately is a conflation of 15 different experiences where you're conscious on the bed when you should be judging it based on your unconscious experience on the bed. So it's really a confusing, frequently there's a buyer's remorse sensation after committing that much capital to something like that. With Casper, we are singular in saying, here, if you don't like it, we just sell one bed. You're not going to have to choose between a super firm or a soft, or a medium firm and a soft. We sell one medium firm bed. If you don't like it, we'll pick it up and we'll return you all of your money. So it's a very simple consumer choice, one which obviously we're taking away the risk from. As a company, I think that there's another interesting component to being such a singular focused company around one product, which is that everything you do, from marketing initiatives to your customer experience research, is done in the framework of how is that experience in relation to this singular product. And as soon as you have a second one or a third one, something that we're thinking about right now, and is that you have to start thinking about those processes and sort of planning in reference to three things that might have a different meaning. So for Casper, it's been a very singular and simplifying experience to work with one product, and one that we will continue to do so. We will continue to do in different verticals as we launch into other categories.
Right, and before we shift gears, I want to touch on a question from our audience, Luke. Chelsea wants to know what type of strategies you guys use to drive so much press to Casper in the early days.
I think that we, from a strategy standpoint, we do have PR agencies. We have worked very hard on the kind of design and focus of our story on our site, which I think makes it intrinsically mediagenic. Our art direction we've invested heavily into. A large part has been giving customers a platform to talk about Casper. So we have an online review site, but often we'll be solicited by outlets, and we'll say, "Oh, I'll talk to this customer." And I think that because of how vocal they are on social media and on other components of Casper's various touch points, it's made us intrinsically as a company a more, I use this word mediagenic because I learned it last week, a more mediagenic company than one that doesn't really invest in that, in kind of the talk and story of how your product is consumed after you sell it. So to give you to give Chelsea an example, a much larger, higher volume selling mattress company typically will not interact post-purchase with their customers. We do interact post-purchase with our customers, and because of that, there's a lot more conversation that occurs on social mediums, which also are the same mediums that journalists are in. And frequently, we'll have some outrageous tweet from a customer, and a journalist will pick it up, and eventually it comes through to us, and we go from there.
Right, and according to Pando Daily, Luke, you guys literally have 26,000 videos of people unpacking their mattresses on YouTube. I know that you're in charge of branding, and Fast Company is calling what you're doing social media genius. When you're thinking about unpacking a box, like you've said, doesn't really have to do with the mattress, but you guys have taken so much care to control the experience, even down to the tool that people use to open it. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, it's far from perfect. We're working on it every day because it is if you're unrolling a king, it's an 80-pound bed that ultimately you have to lift to whatever the room you're in, and the engineering of that experience can only go so far when it comes to your human mass and the mass of the bed. In terms of how we focus on making that experience from the beginning to end perfect, we do frequent focus groups in our office in New York City where people will unbox the bed there. Jeff, our head of product, has actually gone to alongside Casper mattresses that are being delivered and witnessed that occurring in situ in a home without any form of guidance, just context, totally unbiased context to see how it occurs. And we actually continue to rethink our packaging every day. It's the kind of thing that when you sell one product, the incremental innovations on things like packaging are not something that you necessarily announce as a new product. It's something that we can keep focusing on and doing as we grow.
So something like the box, Luke, I love how it looks, and I love the pictures that you see with it just at someone's door, because no one would guess there's a mattress in there. How long do you take to think about the way the box looks?
A long time. So we've worked with, for thinking about the box, there are many debates. One was the color of the box. So we ship our bed via UPS typically across the United States. And
bike sometimes. I've seen it delivered by bike in New York.
Locally in New York by bike, sometimes by literally just like one of those hand forklifts. It depends on the location. But for us, having the box stand out in relation to other packages that are being delivered, have this, when the UPS guy rolls it up to your house and there's people watching that occur, make sure that it is making a statement. And over time in New York, once you have a concentration of that occurring frequently enough, as we do sometimes around our kind of focus area of Soho, people do start to notice that, and it's intrinsically experiential marketing. One of the things that we debated early on was whether we wanted to assume that after 5 days of traveling, for example, from New York to LA, that box is going to be destroyed. So we should almost not put our brand too forefront and center on it, because you would have something that is essentially destroyed in that process. And the other side of the debate was keep the box super clean and white when it's first goes on the truck, and then sort of acknowledge that boxes themselves are not something that's going to stay in perfect shape at the end of the side. And that was like one of the debates we had. We ended up with the latter, and I think we've been very happy with it. Ironically, like having a white box, even once it's broken and destroyed, it still stands out in a way that another color would not. So we'd like to be that like one sort of whale amongst other packages.
I think that's something for me that's the most exciting part about what you guys are doing, because I've been following the company and following you on Twitter, not because you guys are a mattress company, but because of the voice you've attached to Casper. One of my favorite, I'm really corny, and one of my favorite things is what you guys have pinned on your Twitter page. It says, I want to go back to sleep, and then I realize, hey, I am a bed. So what have you done as the director of branding to make me love Casper for a reason that's entirely different than what you're doing?
So I think, firstly on the voice, I actually work with our VP of communications, has been built our social. She was one of our first hires after we launched, and has this very I used the word cheeky earlier, cheeky voice when it comes to mattresses. And I think what's interesting is mattresses are a platform simply because it is such a simple, sort of like awkward product to talk about, and taking yourself too seriously in relation to what you're selling, I think, is a flaw that many companies do make. And with Lindsay, very early on, we cultivated a voice that was recognizing the absurdity of the whole idea of a mattress startup in and of itself, and being self-aware on social media, being cheeky. There's obviously lots of illusions you can make when it comes to mattresses. So I think that one thing that is relatable about Casper is not taking ourselves too seriously about what we sell, despite the fact that we've invested thousands and thousands of hours in taking the product itself very seriously. So it's a weird kind of juxtaposition of personality between those two things, and I think it's one that works very well.
I want to move forward now and discuss the next stages for you guys. As we were talking before we got started, it's been an incredibly rapid growth for you, and you even expanded internationally to Canada in November, and you guys just started working in April. So that's pretty incredible. What made you guys go into Canada and for that international growth so early on?
So like many of these things, it's particularly when you're growing so fast, it's a reactive thing. So early on, we'd be getting tweets, support tickets, even emails directly to kind of, where they email like Luke or or Philip, and they'll write 5 different variations of the email with the hope that they get to a founder saying like, why can't you guys launch in Canada? It ships in a box. It's intuitive that it should ship there. So we actually assembled a large list of people who requested Casper in Canada. We had people coming down to the border, picking up their mattresses, taking it up to the border. And at some point, we realized like this is it's a really meaningful community up there. Let's look at what it takes to do it. And we started talking logistics with our various logistics partners, started shopping different alternatives. And eventually, once that came together, it was a pretty no-brainer to launch up there. And so far, it's been awesome. We've had a great response.
That's great. Do you guys have any plans for more international expansion, or is that under wraps right now?
It's definitely under wraps, but I will say that Casper is an inherently expanding company, so we have a view to bringing great sleep to as many people as possible.
I'll take that. So Philip has said that right now 95% of mattress purchases are still being made offline. What are you guys going to do to take that next 5% and then the next 20%?
Sure. So I think that we look at that first sort of, I guess, the premise of how a mattress is bought is something that needs to change. The idea that you try lots of beds in a conscious state and make a decision on what you're going to ultimately sleep on in a store. The idea that is the most perfect experience is somehow flawed. And how we're trying to change the conversation is a bed should almost prove itself to you and give you a period of time for which, and you give it 100 days for it to do that. And simply by kind of changing the conversation about the customer experience rather than the product. Ultimately, we still sell a mattress. It's really an awesome engineered one, but it's not something that I think is. I don't think it's the most seductive thing about our business. I think it's that trust and really just maximizing and the cheekiness. Maximizing the contrast between the experience we can offer, where we're doing the work to show that we want to prove ourselves to you, versus the other experience, which is front-loading, huge costs. Once that bed is sold to you, as far as the companies, as far as typical retailers are concerned, they don't want to hear from you for another 7 years, or at the least for the mattress. With Casper, we're definitely trying to build a longer-term relationship with our customer. We're doing research into other areas that might allow us to do that, both with products rather than just verbally, and changing the conversation at that level is what we're trying to do.
I know that's one of the things you've hinted to today and you guys have been discussing is moving into some other verticals, but everything, of course, will be related to the 26 years that we spend sleeping.
Yeah.
Can you give us a glimpse into any of those products, Luke? Because I heard that you might be doing dog bags, and I'd love to get one for my dog.
I can't give you a direct glimpse into any of them. At a high level, I think the way we look at sleep is there's multiple products that can actually have a meaningful effect on the quality of your sleep. And with Casper, we would love to be in a situation a few years down the line where a customer at any point when sleep is top of mind, or making an investment in having that 26 years of unconsciousness in their life being serviced better, we would love that in that thinking period, Casper becomes the go-to trust partner. So there's definitely
more to come.
There's definitely more to come, and I think you can think creatively as to some of the most important products that do affect your sleep. So
I'd probably vote for a pillow, but that's okay. I don't have to.
Yeah.
Just throw that out there. So I want to focus, Luke, the last few questions on your creativity. How do you get into a creative state of flow? Run me through a typical project for you.
So for me, it's constraints, I think, has been the biggest thing. Early on, when we'd raised our seed, we had the budgetary constraint was the major constraint, and you have walls around an idea that you have to creatively work with that. As we've grown, and budget may sometimes be less of a constraint, the constraints have had to be almost like artificially imposed on it. So, for example, I'll go into a room with, I think it's very important to have a partner in doing this, and whiteboard around something based on one restriction. So let's think of an example. for example, for a photo shoot, let's say the constraint was the bed is going to be shot in a loft, and your prop budget is $5,000. What's the most creative thing that you can come up with in that context to really deliver, something that no one else has ever done, and contrast Casper in absolute terms with any other mattress manufacturer. So that would be a starting point, and then basically bouncing ideas back and forth within that constraint.
So does the creativity start and end for you? Like, do you go in with a mission, so you put in this artificial constraint, you get everything down on the whiteboard. When do you know that you've created what you wanted to create?
So it never ends, and it's never held within certainly in a company context, it's never held within the boundaries of an individual. I think when there are like concrete constraints where you have to call time on something in order for it to be implemented, because over innovation and over sort of over ideation to a point of taking a concept that may have been 95% ready, and you're trying to get to the 99% to 99 or 100%. In that last 5%, you can spin your wheels and actually bring it back down to like 94 or 93. I think that the way we allow for continued creativity to, for example, because we were using the example of the box onwards, is again, okay, we're looking at making a new printing plate in 2 months, and the deadline for that printing plate is here, and we force that, we impose that as a concrete structural, or a concrete deadline that we have to call time on it, and that will give the necessary end to actually implement that creativity. Creativity in the abstract is ongoing, but it's very important to know when is the right time to implement as opposed to continue the conversation. Also, just because there's not enough hours in the day. I would love to spend 8 hours of the day just coming up with ideas, but it's not a reality with a startup.
So my last question, Luke, is something I'm going to touch on at the end of every 33 Founders episode this season. You're just like me, you're in your 20s, and I've recently been acquainted with quarter life crises, and I don't like them.
Yeah.
How do you deal with uncertainty running a startup?
So I'll say the one advantage to running a startup with uncertainty is there's not much time to think outside of the fact that you're doing a startup. Like, your startup becomes a lot of your identity. And for me, stepping outside of the startup is very scary, and I sometimes find myself finding more creative space and more certainty just putting myself in the framework of, here's Casper, here are the realities of our business, here are the opportunities of our business. Stay within that realm. To the point of, how do I deal with the uncertainty of being in 120s? I recognize that there's no time, there's at any given time in the future, I could do something like Casper, I could do another idea. And from a career perspective, I think I've learned that age is not something other than through a social lens that really affects that. So I would hope that at the age of 55, I feel every bit as welcome to raise venture capital and do the whole startup thing at that stage.
That's a perfect way to end it. Thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Thanks so much.
Let us know what you think about our conversation in the comments.